Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder how scientists actually peek inside our brains to understand what makes us feel happy, sad, or scared? Well, this new look into functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, shows us exactly how they do it. And it's pretty wild. We're talking about using powerful magnets and radio waves to create a map of our emotions. Literally in our heads. So what's the big idea here? Researchers are using a super cool technology called fMRI to figure out which parts of our brain are active when we experience different emotions. Think of it like this. When you feel something, certain parts of your brain light up, and fMRI can see that light. Now, humans have been fascinated by emotions for ages. But only recently, with fancy tools like fMRI, have we started to really understand the biological stuff happening inside us. This research is super important because it helps us understand mental health, develop new treatments, and even inspires future technologies that might feel emotions too. Let's dive into how fMRI works. Imagine your brain cells are like tiny workers in a busy factory. When they get busy doing a job like feeling fear or joy, they need more energy. To get that energy, blood rushes to that part of the brain, bringing oxygen. Here is the secret sauce. Oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood have slightly different magnetic properties. fMRI machines are super sensitive to these differences. When a part of your brain is more active, it gets more oxygen-rich blood, which creates a slightly stronger signal that the fMRI scanner can detect. Remember, fMRI doesn't directly measure brain activity like neurons firing. Instead, it measures the blood flow that supports that activity. It's like seeing steam rising from a building to know that the machines inside are running, even if you can't see the machines directly. Now, fMRI isn't perfect. One big thing to remember is that it is an indirect way of looking at brain activity. We're seeing the blood flow, not the actual electrical signals of your neurons. Also, the brain's response to blood flow changes takes a few seconds. So fMRI isn't great at catching super fast brain events. The way a fast camera might capture a hummingbird's wings. It's more like a slow-motion replay. Compared to other brain scanning methods, fMRI is like a good all-around player. It's not amazing at everything, but it's great at showing us where things are happening in the brain with pretty good detail. PET scans, for example, use tracers to look at specific chemicals in the brain, but they take longer EEG. On the other hand, is super fast and can see brain activity in milliseconds. But it's not very good at telling us exactly where that activity is happening. fMRI strikes a nice balance. So, how do scientists actually use fMRI to study emotions? One common way is called task fMRI. This is where researchers have people do specific things while in the scanner. For example, they might show participants pictures of faces, some happy, some sad, some angry. While the person is looking at the faces, the fMRI machine scans their brain. By comparing the brain activity when someone sees a happy face versus a neutral face, researchers can start to map out which brain areas are involved in experiencing happiness. There are a bunch of these task-based games and activities. Some involve viewing emotional faces or scenes, like famous paintings or short film clips. Others might ask you to try and control your emotions, like being told to calm down when you see something upsetting. There is even a cool task called the gambling task, which looks at how our brains handle risk and reward, big feelings in themselves. But what about when we're not actively doing a task? Turns out our brains are still busy. This is where resting state fMRI comes in. In this type of study, participants just lie in the scanner and relax, maybe stare at a cross on the screen. The idea is to see how different parts of the brain are connected and talk to each other even when we're not focused on anything specific. By looking at these connections, scientists can understand the brain's underlying wiring diagram for different emotional states and how these connections might differ between people or between groups of people, like those with anxiety versus those without. It's like mapping out the highways of your brain's constant chatter. Now, real-world emotions aren't usually as simple as seeing a single picture. They're complex and unfold over time. That's where naturalistic fMRI comes in. This is a newer approach where people might watch a movie or listen to a story while in the scanner. This allows researchers to study how our brains react to more lifelike, dynamic experiences. They can see how different parts of the brain work together as a movie's plot twists and turns, pulling us into different emotional states. It's like watching your brain react to a whole story. not just a single chapter. So we've got all this brain data. How do scientists make sense of it? This is where the analytic techniques come in, which are basically the fancy math and statistics that turn raw fMRI signals into meaningful insights. One common method is called mass univariate contrast testing. Imagine you have data from 100 different points in your brain. This method looks at each of those points one by one and asks, does this specific spot show a different level of activity when someone sees a happy face compared to a sad face? It's like taking one pixel at a time from a huge picture and comparing its color value in different parts of the image. The trick here is that you have to be careful not to make overblown conclusions. Just because a brain area lights up when you are happy doesn't mean it only does that. Brains are complex and do many things at once. Another cool technique is called decoding. Instead of asking if a brain region is more active, decoding asks, can we predict what emotion someone is feeling based on the pattern of activity across many different brain areas? It's like trying to read a secret code. By looking at the whole pattern of brain signals, scientists can train computer programs to identify different emotions. This is powerful because it suggests that emotions might be represented by unique patterns of brain activity, not just a single spot. Then there are voxel-wise encoding models. These are super useful for those naturalistic fMRI studies, where people watch movies. Imagine breaking down a movie into all sorts of features, the types of emotions shown, how exciting it is, who is on screen, what they're saying. Encoding models try to predict what your brain is doing based on these movie features. They try to answer questions like, how well does the amount of suspense in a movie predict activity in this specific part of your brain? This helps map how external stimuli, like those in a film, relate to brain activity. Connectome-based predictive modeling, or CBPM, is all about those resting state scans. Remember how we talked about brain-wide connections? CBPM uses those connections to build models that can predict things about a person. For example, it might look at your brain's resting state connections and try to predict how anxious you are or how good you are at controlling your emotions. It is about finding patterns in how your brain is wired that link to your emotional traits. Related to CBPM are graph-theoretic approaches. This is like looking at your brain's connections as a complex network, like a social network or a roadmap. Scientists can then use math to analyze this network. They can see which nodes, brain areas are most important, or how different communities of brain areas work together. This helps understand the overall structure and efficiency of your brain's emotional processing. Regional homogeneity, or ReHo, looks in a different way at resting state data. Instead of looking at connections between distant parts, ReHo examines how closely synchronized the activity is within a small, local area of the brain. It's like asking, are the brain cells right next to each other all doing the same thing at the same time? High synchrony in certain areas might be related to certain emotional states or traits. Finally, there is intersubject correlation analysis, or ISC. This is a fantastic tool for those movie-watching studies. ISC basically measures how much everyone's brain is doing the same thing at the same time when watching the same movie. If a specific scene makes most people feel a thrill, then there should be similar brain activity patterns across many people watching that scene. High ISC means that a brain region is reliably tracking the movie's content across different individuals. It's a way to find the brain signals that are shared and consistent when we experience something together. So, what does all this mean? fMRI has given us an amazing window into the biological basis of our emotions. By using these different techniques, from observing brain activity during specific tasks to analyzing brain connections at rest, or even while watching a movie, scientists are building a more detailed picture of how our brains create and manage our emotional lives. This research is really powerful because it helps us understand not just normal emotional experiences, but also what might go wrong in conditions like anxiety or depression. By mapping these neural underpinnings, we can develop better treatments and support systems for people struggling with their emotions. The greatest strength of this research area is its ability to link subjective emotional experiences to objective brain activity. It's moving our understanding of emotion from purely psychological terms to a more biological and neurological understanding. However, it is important to remember the limitations we discussed, like fMRI being an indirect measure and its slower temporal resolution. Future research could explore how these different fMRI methods can be combined for even richer insights, perhaps looking at how brain activity during a movie changes when someone is trying to regulate their emotions. It also opens up questions about how our emotional brains develop over time and how we can support healthy emotional development through targeted interventions. What do you think about this brain mapping technology? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed learning about how fMRI helps us understand emotions, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science breakdowns. And hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the fascinating world of the human mind. Thanks for watching.